Okay, hello everybody. My name is Mattias Fras from Nordea. Glad to see all of you here. I know this is called the Applied Analytics stage, or Applied Data Science stage even. There's not going to be much applied data science in my talk. This is going to be more a talk about how to get things done in a large corporate. So sorry if you are expecting a lot of deep tech talk on analytics, then maybe this is not for you. But nevertheless, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we get things done in Nordea and the learning so far in our journey in terms of applying new technology. I've been in the bank since 2011. I have a background in management consulting before that, where I did all kinds of stuff that management consultants are doing or used to be doing anyway, like outsourcing and new operating models and nearshoring and offshoring and lean and all that stuff. And it's not until 2015 when I started working with robotics in Nordea that I saw something that could really make an impact on a business. And that's why I think this is so great. This is different from the way we used to do change. So I am now part of Nordea's group data management office. So we are basically to solve the data problem for the bank and also to build stuff on top of that data together with the business. And we're doing it by, so my focus right now is on one hand to work out how we should organize, what should be local, what should be central, what kind of life cycle we should have for machine learning, and what is the difference between that and the one for software development that we already have. What new policies and procedures and protocols do we need to make sure that we do this in a safe way? What are the implications on our risk management structures and frameworks that we have? So that is like on one hand, the more like strategic work, and on the other hand, it's like doing stuff. So really trying to get shit done and getting stuff into production. So we have a portfolio of 5 to 10 AI applications that we are using and that are in production now, or machine learning. I heard that the difference between a business guys like myself and a data scientist is when they talk about machine learning, they talk in Python, and when people like me talk about this, it's AI and it's on PowerPoint. So this is PowerPoint, right? I wish I was a data scientist, but I'm not. So take it from the top a little bit. I'm going to talk about a little bit on like, okay, what do we mean? And you know the answer to this. And then a little bit what we do in Nordea with it. I will not go through the example so much, but I will also touch on the last thing, which is more the cultural aspects of getting shit done in a large corporate that is heavily regulated. So hopefully there will be some questions, and please stop me and raise your hand during. That would be even more fun. So this slide we all have seen, and we all know this guy, I think, Andrew Ng, and I have used this slide for 2 years. I think he has used it for 4 years. But I think it still holds, and it's still a really good way of describing, what we're dealing with here. It's not just some narrow function or something that is going to hit a particular area. It's going to influence a lot of things. And I know in banking, because I've been through the whole bank now, I think, from retail banking to wholesale banking to institutions to markets to research to compliance to yesterday I had a meeting with our operational risk guys where we're looking into how can we automatically update our policies based on new changes in regulations coming in, right? So every part of the bank is getting hit by, or is going to be hit by this, or be able to leverage this. And I think that goes for all the industries as well, right? So I think it's an interesting saying that I think a McKinsey Institute, Research Institute came out with last year where they said that 50% of the jobs that the activities that 50% of the stuff people do in the world economy can already be automated by existing technology. But only 5% of the jobs can be automated away, which means every job will be affected more or less. And I think they predict in banking about 50% has the potential to be automated already today, right? So then why is this? So why don't we see any effects yet? Anyway, so there's a lot of talk about AI and the big potential and the huge impact. And it's interesting with these quotes, I think, that we don't even have a common definition of what AI is. So when you say this, you don't really know what that means, right? And if you look, of course, if you look it up in everybody has their own definitions. I'm sure in this room we have different definitions of AI is, and for simplicity, maybe for now, let's just talk about machine learning and what is different between machine learning and standard applications, the way they've always been, right? It's basically that we're providing data and examples, and we get the rules instead of the other way around, getting data and rules to get the answers. So, but you know all this, right? So I don't have to go into this one. I kind of, just as AI is a general technology, I have a general PowerPoint that I can use for different presentations or purposes. So I will just skip through this really fast. But for Nordea, then, this is how we apply machine learning today. So this is when I talk to the business. It's like, okay, what do we talk about? We talk about being able to interpret stuff. So take unstructured text, make it structured. Take a question, match it with an intent and a question and an answer. Take a picture or PDF and make it understandable. So the ability to sense and understand stuff, which is mainly, I think, that the area is around deep learning, so the technique behind that stuff, and we do that, of course. And then you do something with that. So you either detect patterns. So in financial fraud, we use that to reduce the number of false positives, right? So you have this huge rule systems that spits out 1,000 alerts. And then we have a machine learning application that looks at this and say, okay, 900 of these, don't worry about them. They are not real cases. Focus on these 100 ones, for example. That's an application we have in production. So it's kind of, it's not transformative yet, but it's kind of supporting the case handler, right? It's a nice efficiency gain. Foresight is the ability to predict stuff. There was an example from OPI here on property pricing prediction. You can use this to predict the creditworthiness of people. You can use this for many different things. We use it mainly to predict the next best action for the customer that's on the web or on the phone, and to suggest or to run marketing campaigns, for example. Customization is about trying to be the Netflix of banking, I guess. So how can you be more specific and targeted towards your we have 11 or 10 or 11 million customers in Nordea, big mass market with maybe 6-7 million people. How can you be more customized towards that segment by using data in a better way? Make decisions. We have some applications where we actually use machine learning to make decisions on claims handling, for example. So if you work in Norway and you get sick, you have the right to this insurance. You log in and your case get treated by us, and then we have a system where we can actually, we have an AI that looks through documents, medical records and so on to look for specific diseases and dates and medicines and come up with a suggested decision on that. We have a conversation, so chatbots. Everybody has a chatbot, right? And chatbot is a favorite subject of mine. I'm not going to go into detail here, but it's amazing how many chatbots there are right now, and it's amazing how many bad ones there are. And I was at this conference last week in Amsterdam. It's called the World Summit AI, which is it's a huge AI conference. And it was clear that the chatbot hype is clearly over. You know, a lot of companies have gone through that, and they realize that this is hard. It's not as easy as we thought. So it's kind of taking a step back now, and although everybody has one, nobody has a good one. I know that our chatbot is doing some value. You know, I think Nova has about 150 or so thousand conversations per month, which is quite a bit. But you know, it's still in the early stages in terms of looking at how many interactions we have in total with customers, and also, you know, the experience with them, right? Because it's new skills that we generally don't have. It's not CX, it's conversational skills, right? So anyway, I think that's an interesting area. So what can you do? Well, in our bank, we use a lot of things. For some things, I mentioned a few already. We are also using it to manage, to automate customer feedback insight by reading emails with unstructured text and making analytics on that. We are working on doing the same for speech. So you can, if you can get an understanding of what customers are telling us. In Sweden, we get 11 million phone calls per year, for example. If you can have an AI look at that and come up with what actually people are talking about and what they are really meaning, and that will be a great insight in terms of improving the experience, right? Trade surveillance, AML, every bank is doing that, I think. So when we talk to the business, we talk about three things mainly. We talk about making the digital experience smarter. So that is mainly chatbots and some recommendation systems for now. We're talking about making it a better place to work by introducing tools like this AML case handling tool where we reduce false positives, or we do this automation of customer feedback, or stuff that just makes our people being able to focus on the more fun stuff or the more relevant stuff. And then instant banking, which is basically about automation. But automate the stuff that make a difference for the customer. I mean, that is important, and I think it's in the way you think about the problem where you come up with, you know, what you should do. And I give you some examples, because this is one of my favorite slides, and I did it when I came back from California for a couple of years ago, where the first question I got from these companies over there, and also the companies and the investors, would be like, okay, so what 10x stuff are you working on? What's your 10x stuff? And I didn't understand 10x. I pretended I did, but after a while I had to ask him, what do you mean by 10x? Well, it's not the incremental stuff, but the Horizon 2, Horizon 3 stuff. What problems are you trying to solve? Which was the second question they asked. Not what kind of solutions, what kind of use cases, but what problems are you trying to solve? So those are some of the things that I really am passionate about, and what I'm working on is like, how do you make people fall in love with the problem instead of falling in love with the solution? So how do you spend time on a problem and really getting down to, you know, what it is that you're trying to solve and why? You know, you say you want to solve the customer churn problem. Okay, why? And how do you define churn? And what would you do if you knew that, you know, this customer has a 60% probability of churning in the next 3 months? What do you do then? I mean, like really digging down to like, okay, why and what and why and how. And when I was at this conference last week in Amsterdam, this is very much what the community is talking about. Like, why which problem should you solve and why? And are you sure you understand the implications of you implementing that solution? Do you understand the risks? Do you understand the potential biases, ethical considerations? Can you explain it to someone? Because otherwise there will be no trust and it will never work. So I think these things are really, now when we kind of leaving the first initial hype stage where everybody's doing some POCs, and maybe you even have some stuff in production. Maybe you even have it in real production, not just sandbox, which is most of the stuff that's in production is actually in the sandbox, but really in production. I think that's now when those new questions are starting to emerge, I think. And I think they are very important. And I think that the value from AI or machine learning comes only when you are able to affect or the business, the business process or the business model even, right? Because as long as you're in banking, we are very regulated. So regulated, rule-based. Regulated, policy-driven, rule-based. That's our business. And we're trying to go to data-driven. Machine learning, data-driven. Not exact, but highly likely that this will be the case instead of having a rule. So that there's the big challenge for heavy regulated businesses, right? So when you're now starting to implement those initial machine learning algorithms, like the ML one I told you about, you have the rule engine, it spits out a number of alerts, and then you have an AI removing some of these alerts. But it's still quite incremental, right? It's almost like, not cute, but it's kind of limited impact. The impact will come when you kind of when you combine machine learning and rule engines, I think, all together. And that goes for financial crime, but also for credit, pricing, and other areas. But that requires trust. So, but since we all now have access to more or less the same technology, we can all pay, high-skilled talent, or we can bring in good consultants. So we can pretty much solve which problem we want to solve. And we know that all the problems we have, they have already been solved somewhere in the world, or most likely. So I think that to me that the winners now will be like the ones that solve the right problems. So back to this notion of falling in love with the problem and not with the solution, really trying to pick out the right problems. And for banking, I think there are 5 big problems in banking that you need to solve. And if you're curious to which ones there are, you can catch me later. So I will not go through these examples. I thought I would just, if there are no comments or questions, I'll jump into by the way, if you're interested in banking, I'm just going to show this one. If you're interested in like what's like the implications of machine learning and AI in the financing sector, there was a great report last year by the World Economic Forum. It was like 180 slides or something like that. It's like crazy report, but it's one of the best kind of biggest papers on what be the potential effects from machine learning on finance. And it's interesting how they talk about, so you have all these technologies and these use cases. And then you have all these research papers and the potential with technology, but nobody's really talking about what would be like the implications of doing these things, and that is, I think, to me, very, very interesting. So if you take one of these, insurers act as lines of defense. So if you have a lot of good data, if the insurance companies have a lot of good data, they can go from being the traditional insurance company and pay out money to you for your damage on your house, but try to predict that things do not happen instead and sell that service. So they will proactively tell you when there is a risk for something, so you can prevent stuff from happening with Internet of Things and stuff like that. So, how might that change in the insurance industry? And there's a lot of other examples here that I think are really interesting. The fraud utility is a I don't understand how we haven't already solved that problem, right? Why should each bank try to solve the AML and financial fraud instead of joining forces and also with public bodies solve that for the customer, right? It's not something that we should compete on. Anyway, so I'd like to just talk a little bit about also on like what does it take to make this happen in a large corporate? Because as I said, this is like a new way of working, and you could argue, although I would say that in 16, all the consultants started to talk about robotics. That's about the time when we started. Nobody talked about AI yet. Some people talked about it, but it's like AI, In 16, they started to pick up, but it was only like in 17 that people really started to talk about AI and machine learning. I'm not sure if you agree, but that is my experience in my business. And now it's 19, and everybody's talking about it. So it's gone really fast. So it shouldn't be a surprise that it's hard to just change the mindset and the way of thinking. Going from rule-based to data, or rule-driven to data-driven way of thinking. I mean, it's hard, and it is about this culture thing between the shiny shoes and the sneakers. So I'm wearing sneakers now. Today I have my fastest sneakers, the red ones. I only use for special occasions. I have black and blue as well. But the thing is, I used to be the shiny shoe. I was the CFO of a Swedish life company, so I know what it's like to be regulated and having to be, really strict and have really, good risk management controls and measurements and so on. And now I'm the sneaky guy, and trying to kind of disrupt old me in a sense. But I don't think it's not disrupt, but you need both. I mean, you need both, but you need to strike the right balance. And right now, because it's been going so fast, there's still 99% is on the shiny shoe, or 95, or depending on what company you are, how mature you are. But the thing is, you need both. You can't just be a sneaker. It's not gonna. I mean, you can try to be a sneaker. I mean, some fintech companies are sneakers, and I think that they will have some success. But unless you can be trusted and be, because the regulators will, they will regulate you. I mean, they will do more so in this part of the world, and that's a good thing, I think. I mean, I would not like to live in a society where things get out of control with machine learning. Now, when you can basically, and Google talks about this, and I'm very worried about this. Now you can write, instead of writing a million lines of code, you can write 2 lines. Optimize for this, use this data set, and then go. So that means that you need to start thinking about, you don't have to think so much about writing code, but you need to think about other things, like what will happen, what are the risks, why am I doing this, what's it for, how do I explain it? And so the shiny shoe is needed, definitely. But right now, it's definitely the balance towards too much. And I think there's a few things that I really I go to 2:30, right? Is 2:30 stopping time? No, you don't know. Okay. 2:25 maybe. Okay. So 2:30. Great. So there are a few things that I have experienced in Nordea, but also experienced from talking to other companies that I really think are fundamentally needed to do this, to become data-driven. And to become data-driven, by the way, is not easy. Even Google and Facebook and those guys struggle. I listened to them last week. I mean, they are on a different scale, of course, But it's Google, they went AI first a couple of years ago only, so they haven't been there for that long either, right? So we can learn from them also. But you've probably heard about these things, right? Siloed work, interdisciplinary and cross-functional collaborations. So robotics in 15, chatbots in 16, and now machine learning, and in 17. From my perspective, they are all like common technologies. Everybody will use them in their business line. But it's the first time we have that. It used to be that you buy a procurement system or a CRM system or like an HR system or a sales system or whatever. But now you buy this system that serves us all. But that means that you need to have a different way. It doesn't really make sense to have the functional split anymore. Or you can have that, but then you need to work, across. And I mean, truly across. So I guess that's what Agile is about. But I see a lot of Agile models, and they are still kind of functional. So truly sort of cross-functional collaboration, I think, is really, really important. And to go from, I worked here for 30 years. I know what I'm talking about. To, okay, let's see what the data is saying, telling us what to do. I mean, that is a huge thing. I spent a year and a half now discussing with Group Credit to do stuff, and now they're coming along, so now we will do that. But it takes time, right? And it is a new. It is difficult to go from being data driven, from being policy rule based to be data driven, right? And really be at the front. So really kind of. We talk about this democratization of data and so on, which means that you really need to have the business involved in the stuff, not being a centralized function that do it for them. And you have to be able to take risks and fail and learn, and that is not in the DNA for regulated business either, and maybe not for any business that's older than 20 years. So the Google Glass guy that got 6 million for his failure. That was, I don't see that happening in my business maybe, but the guy that developed those Google glasses was a huge investment and it totally crashed and burned. But he got a $6 million bonus for trying. So, and that's their way to sort of send a signal that, good try, keep on trying. We got a huge learning here. So I think that's kind of that's a cultural thing. That's not to be underestimated. I think that what I do in the bank, and I think what you guys are doing, if you're in the business, is telling stories to try to get people on board, try to get them hooked. So rather than to come up with a business case to say how much will we save for the next year, you will try to tell the story about why we need to go away from trying to incrementally improve this business process that we have tried to incrementally improve for the last 20 years to just do it in this way instead. Because we can do that now. We can do credit scoring, or we can do pricing, or we can do claims handling or underwriting, or a lot of things in a different way. We can create a KYC utility over here and then use that instead. And so that's kind of the storytelling I think that is needed. And once you have someone up there, a senior person, that gets it, get close to the tipping point, then you can start do things. But it can be hard to get them there. And you also need to understand the specific barriers in the organization. So what is stopping us now from doing from going to an idea to production? What is specific for my company? Well, it could be the way that we manage access rights to applications, or it could be segregation of duties, or it could be talent, or it could be whatever, right? But you need to figure out what are specific barriers. So management needs to figure that out and try to remove them from the company. The budgeting processes is usually broken in large corporations. We have no idea what we're going to spend money on in April next year. I mean, and you cannot know that, right? You can know some stuff, But you also need to have money set aside for really great ideas or trigger or spikes that you don't know right now, right? So that changes the way you do the budgeting. And I've been part of doing some of that work in our bank. And then trying to balance the feasibility in the types of use cases you do. Some things you do for show, quick wins. You might want to have 1 or 2 moonshots going. Not very fond of that, but you could. But the point is that you must have some short-term stuff to show value and get people on board. But you should also have like the big things, like for banking, the credit problem. You need to start working on that. You know that already, and you need to start working on that. So balancing that portfolio is important. I think the organizational-wise, we all. I mean, the hub and spoke is kind of a general thing, but nobody thinks that a super central organization is good. Nobody thinks that a super local is good. So it's somewhere in between. And I think that the gray area, which is kind of the gray area, will be thinner or thicker depending on the maturity of the company. So if you're more mature, you can have more decentralized model. If you're less mature, you have a more centralized organization. So that is that needs to be worked out within the company. I think if your consultancy firm comes in and say you should have this set up, they don't know, because every company is different, and you need to consider the specifics of your company. The other part is like, how do you do innovation? How do you build machine learning, new machine learning applications? Do you try to, convince the whole pricing community to build something up, or do you sort of set up a new company over here, like a new company, and then try to disrupt the mothership? How far away from the mothership do you need to be when you develop these things? That depends on where you are and how you. That's also a thing I learned in California. There are 2 schools. One is called edge innovation, where you kind of separate them, and core innovation, you try to build from within. And we all need to figure out, what is our optimal distance from the mothership. Second last thing, of course, there needs to be awareness and education. I think this was one thing that I heard from Facebook. I think it was in last week in this conference, that they are of course way ahead of everybody else, right? But they still struggle with the fact that you have different. You don't have the same objectives across organizations, and machine learning engineering and regular engineering, they don't really get along and stuff like that. So I think creating this is important for us who are like just getting started in a way. The leaders of big organizations, they must sort of understand what will be the implications of this, and try to help remove these barriers that exist today. I mean, that should be their main role, I think. And then you have the analytics guys. Of course, you need the data scientists and machine learning engineers and all those guys, really good people that can build this stuff. That's needless to say, right? I think you can also discuss whether you should have them all in-house or whether you should buy them, and I think you should do a combination. Then you need to have the translators. That would be like me, kind of talking to the business. What problems do you have? Talking to the smart people. How can we solve this? How can you figure out whether this idea is the right one or not? So being like the translator and the bridge between here, I think, is important. And then, of course, getting the end users, the people that are going to use this churn model and know what to do if there's a propensity of 60% that this will churn. What do I do with it? I mean, you need to understand that as well. Last one. So basically, I think it's really important that management starts to ask questions around what can we do, how can we solve problems with these new techniques, how can we use data to be more customer focused and so on. So that's really the leaders that need to start asking questions to the people that can build this stuff, and making sure that everything you do is tied to almost everything you do is tied to the business. So business decides what problem they want to use, what KPIs they want to move, and then try to sort of set up a little startup company and work there with the business. Some stuff are more generic and general enablers that needs to be taking place as well, but most use cases need to be tied to business outcome. Yeah, and then you need to track and facilitate adoption, so track what people are doing, how we're maturing. It's also good, of course. And I think the last one is about how can you get business excited about stuff? One way is to say, okay, I have some money here. I can invest in this POC for you, and then you can see how great this will be. But also that I think this evangelism and talking and getting the passionate people involved is also super important. Has been for me at least. So that was it. And what it boils down to basically is it's not about AI or machine learning as such. It's more like how can you think about solving problems in a new way, being innovative, and see how you can find the right balance between the people working and the machines. I think this was good towards human-centered data and innovation. I mean, I think that's a good saying, but it's of course also hard to maybe depict what it actually means. But that's it. Thank you.